Hi, I'm Joseph, and I'm here today to present to you one of the most important things in tractor-trailer operation, and that is the pre-trip inspection. Today's course will be in 7 segments, and they are front of trailer, engine compartment, driver's side fuel area, in-cab inspection, exterior lights, rear of tractor, front of trailer, side and rear of trailer. We're going to start our inspection with the front of the vehicle. We're going to start at the top with the clearance lights. They're not cracked or missing, and they're proper color amber. And I worked my way down to the windshield. The windshield is clear and clean and no obstructions. I'm checking the windshield wipers. They're securely mounted and not broken. I'm going to check my mirror bracket and mount. They're secure and clean and not broken. I'm going to check the headlights. The headlights are clean. The signal lights are proper color amber and they're not broken. I'm going to check under the engine. I'm looking for puddles and leaks under the engine and transmission. And at this point, I will open the hood and check the engine components. I'm going to check some hoses that they're not cut, they're not frayed, they're not loose. My couplings and fittings are tight. They're not leaking. I'm checking my alternator. It's securely mounted. My wires are secure. It's belt driven. The belt is not cut, frayed. There are no loose fibers. And if I depress it, it shouldn't move more than 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to check my exhaust system, starting with the turbo. There are no holes, no rust, no missing or loose clamps. There are no soot. My connections are tight. There are no severe dents. And I'm going to follow it back to the rear of the truck and where the exhaust ends. I'm checking there are no missing nuts and bolts. All my brackets are tight. There's no soot, holes, or rust in my exhaust pipe. Okay, I'm going to go around to the left side. Over on the left side, I'm going to check my coolant reservoir. I'm looking for leaks. I'm checking to see that it's at the adequate level between the cold minimum and cold maximum. I'm going to check my hoses. I'm looking for cuts, tears, loose fibers. I'm checking my clamps and couplers. They're tight. I'm going to the power steering pump. It's secure and not leaking. The power steering pump is belt driven. I'm checking the belt. It's no cuts, tears, or loose fibers. And if I press on it, it shouldn't deflect more than 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. Any more would cause possibly slippage. I'm going to check my engine oil. I would remove the dipstick. I would wipe it, reinsert it, and I would pull it out again, and I would check the level. It should be above the refill mark. If it were below the refill mark, I would add oil here. I'm going to check my power steering reservoir. It's at the adequate level. It's securely mounted. I'm going to check the power steering hose. It's secure. Hoses, clamps, couplers are tight. It's not leaking. I'm going to check the power steering pump. It's securely mounted. It's not leaking, and it's gear driven. And right behind it is the air compressor. The air compressor is securely mounted. It's not leaking, and it's gear driven. I'm checking the shock absorber. It's securely mounted top and bottom, not leaking. I'm also going to check the steering linkage, the pitman arm, the drag link, and the upper steering arm. All ball joints and sockets are tight. The castle nut and cotter pins are in place. I'm checking the leaf spring mounts. They are securely mounted, not broken. I'm checking leaf springs. They're not cracked, shifted, or broken. All bushings bolts are in place. The U-bolts are not bent. There are no missing nuts. I'm going to check my brake hose. It supplies air to the brake chamber. It's not cut. No abrasions or leaks. All my couplings and fittings are tight. I'm checking the brake chamber. It's securely mounted, not leaking. All nuts and bolts are secure and no missing clamps. I am checking the slack adjuster and push rod. All cotter pins and pivot pins are in place. If I were to pull on the slack adjuster with the brakes released and the wheels chocked, the slack adjuster and push rod should not move more than 1 inch. I'm going to the inside of the steer tire. I'm checking my brake drum. It's not cracked or broken. All nuts and bolts are tight. I'm checking the brake lining. The brake lining is not dangerously worn thin, and there are no contaminants on the brake lining or brake shoe, such as grease and oil. I'm checking the rim. Inside and out, there are no cracks, no weld repairs, no rust trails. I'm checking the lug nuts. They're all present, they're all tight, and there are no distortion of the bolt holes. I'm checking the hub oil seal. It's secure and not leaking. The oil is at the adequate level. Checking the valve stem and cap. It's present, it's not bent, and the valve cap is on. And should I check the tire pressure with a tire gauge, I would check it here at the valve stem. I'm going to close the hood, and now I'm going to check my clearance light, my left turn signal, and four-way flasher, a proper color amber. I'm going to check the mirror mounts, and the mirrors, they're securely mounted. They're clean and not broken. I'm checking my door. It opens and it closes properly. I'm checking my door seals as well as the seals around the tractor. I'm checking the hinges. The hinges are secure, not broken. I'm now going to check my safety equipment. I'm going to open the cargo door and examine my fire extinguisher. It's securely mounted and properly filled and properly rated fire extinguisher. I'm going to check for my 3 red reflective triangles. They're all present, not broken. I am checking for my spare fuses, and if they're not here, they would be in my glove box. I'm going to examine my fuel tank and cap. The fuel tank is securely mounted. There are no leaks under the tank. My cap is tight, it's not leaking. I'm going to examine the steps. The steps are securely mounted. They're not broken, and there are no foreign objects on the steps, and it will hold my weight. We're here in the cab. I'd like to begin my in-cab inspection with a check of the safety belt. The safety belt locks. The safety belt itself is not cut, frayed, there are no loose fibers, and it's securely mounted to the floor and to the cab. I'd like to check my mirrors. They're clean and adjusted to me. I'm going to now check the windshield. It's clear and free of obstructions. The very first thing I'm going to do is a safe start. I'm going to depress my clutch and check my gear shift lever. It should be in neutral. I'm going to turn the key to the on position. My ABS light came on in the dash and it went off right away. That indicates that the ABS system is working correctly. I'm going to depress the clutch, check to see if my gear shift lever is in neutral, and I'm going to start the engine. Okay, I'd like to begin by checking my gauges, my instrument gauges. My voltmeter is reading 12 to 14 volts. My oil pressure, normal operating range is 40 to 60 psi. My water temp operating range is 150 degrees to 180 degrees Fahrenheit. My air pressure gauges, primary and secondary, normal operating range is 120 to 140 psi, or according to manufacturer's specifications. I want to check my windshield wipers. They're operating. They're mounted firmly to the windshield. Checking my windshield washer fluid. It's working properly. I'm going to check my horns, my city horn and my air horn. Now I'd like to check my light indicators. My left turn indicator is working properly. My right turn indicator is working properly. My high beam indicator is working properly. And my four-way flasher indicator is working properly. I now would like to check my heater and defroster. I'm going to turn the blower on. I'm going to set the heat and defrost setting, and I'm going to check above the dash my defroster is blowing properly, and check below the dash my heater is working properly. Okay, what I'd like to do next is a tug test. I'm going to test my trailer brakes to see that they're holding properly. I'm going to engage the clutch. I'm going to put my truck in low gear and release the tractor brake and leave the trailer brake engaged. I'm going to release the clutch slightly, and my trailer brakes are holding properly. Now I'd like to engage the tractor brake and release the trailer brake. I want to check my parking brakes. So I'm going to release the clutch and give it a tug. That tells me that my tractor brakes or parking brakes are holding. The next thing I'd like to do is a service brake check. I'm going to put it in a low gear, and I want to move forward about 20 feet and apply the brakes, and my service brakes should hold. Okay, my service brakes are working properly. It did not pull to the left or right. If it pulled to the left or right, that would indicate a need for service. Okay, the next step that I'd like to cover is my air brake check. I'm going to build up pressure to the normal operating range of 120 to 140 psi. Now I will turn the engine off. I'm going to turn the key back to the on position and wait for my gauges to reset. The first thing I'd like to do, my parking brakes are released. I'm going to apply pressure to the service brake pedal, and once my air pressure level's off, I'm going to check. It should not leak more than 4 psi in 1 minute. I'm going to apply pressure, and I'm looking at the gauges. I'm listening for leaks, and I did not leak more than 4 psi in 1 minute. The next step I'd like to do is my low air warning buzzer and light. At or before 55 psi, my low air warning buzzer and light should come on. I'm going to fan my service brakes as the pressure drops. When it reaches at or before 55 psi, the low air warning system should come on. Okay, my low air warning light on the dash came on, and the buzzer, it came on. That tells me that my low air warning system is working properly. The next step I'd like to do is I'm going to fan the brakes. When my air pressure drops to 20 to 40 psi, my tractor protection valve will close and my parking brake buttons will pop out. Okay, my buttons have popped out, my parking brake buttons have popped out. So my air brake system is working properly. And this concludes my in-cab inspection. I'd like to begin a light check of my lights, exterior. I'm going to start with my clearance lights. I want to move down to my headlights. My low beam, my high beam. I'm going to check my left turn signal, my right turn signal, my hazard lights. We're going to move to the left side of the tractor. I'm going to check my left turn signal, my hazards, and my clearance lights. I'd like to move to the front upper corner of my trailer. I need to check my clearance lights. From there, we'll move to the rear of the tractor. I want to check my left turn signal, my right turn signal, my hazard lights, my brake and tail lights, and my clearance lights. Next, we move to the left side of the trailer. I want to check my left turn signal, my hazard lights, and my clearance lights. I want to move to the rear of the trailer. I'd like to check my left turn signal, my right turn signal, my hazard lights, brake and tail lights, and marker lights. I would now move to the right side of the trailer and truck, and I would check all the lights down the right side of the trailer and tractor as I did on the left side. I am now checking the condition of my catwalk. It's securely mounted, it's not damaged, and it's free of obstruction. I'm also checking the drive shaft. It's not twisted, bent, or damaged. My U-joints have no foreign objects in them. I'm checking the frame, my longitudinal frame. There's no twist or cracks and no wells to the frame. I'm checking the cross member to the frame. There are no missing nuts and bolts. It's not damaged. I'm going to move to my brake lines and my electrical cord. My brake lines are not twisted or damaged or crimped. My connections to the trailer and the tractor are secure, not leaking. My electrical cord is not taped or damaged and no exposed wires. I'd like to move to the header board. There's no damage to the front of the trailer, no missing rivets. It'll hold my cargo. I will now check the clearance light at the top of my trailer. It's not broken, it's clean, and it's the proper color amber. I'm now going to move to the suspension. I would like to check my spring hanger, front spring hanger. It's securely mounted, not broken. I'd like to check my leaf spring. It's not cracked, shifted, or missing. All my bushings and bolts are in place. I'd like to check the U-bolts. U-bolts are not cracked or missing any nuts. I want to check the shock absorber. It's securely mounted and it's not leaking. I'd like to check the brake hose. It supplies air to the brake chamber. It's not cut or leaking, and my couplings and fittings are securely mounted on both ends. I'd like to check the brake chamber. The brake chamber is securely mounted It's not leaking. There are no missing nuts and bolts and no missing clamps. I'd like to check the slack adjuster and push rod. There are no missing clevis pins or cotter pins. It's securely mounted. And if I would pull on the slack adjuster and push rod with the brakes released and the wheels chocked, it would not move more than 1 inch. I want to check the torque arm. Torque arm, the bushings and bolts are in place. It's not broken or bent. I want to check the brake drum and brake lining. The brake drum is not cracked or bent. There are no missing nuts and bolts. I'd like to check the brake lining. It's not dangerously worn thin, and there are no contaminants such as grease and oil on the lining or the brake drum. I want to check the inside of the rim and outside of the rim. There are no cracks, no wells, no rust trails. I want to check the loosened lug nuts. All the lug nuts are present. They're not loose. There are no distortion to the bolt holes. I want to check the axle seal. The axle seal is tight. It's not leaking. There are no missing nuts and bolts. I want to check the valve stem and cap. They're present. They're not loose. They're not leaking. I would check my air pressure with a tire gauge for proper air pressure. I want to check the apron. The apron is not cracked or broken, and it's lying flat on the fifth wheel skid plate. There is no gap. I cannot see daylight. I want to check the air hose to the sliding fifth wheel. The air hose is not cracked or leaking. The fittings and couplings on both ends are tight. I want to check the sliding fifth wheel pins. They're locked in place. My release arm and safety latch. My release arm is in place, locked in place. My mounting bolts are all tight. There are none missing or loose. My fifth wheel skid plate is properly lubricated. All clevis pins and cotter pins are in place. The pivot pins are locked in place. I want to check the airbag. The airbag is fully inflated, not damaged or leaking. The airbag mounts, top and bottom, are securely mounted and not broken. I want to check the butt spacing between the tires. The tires are evenly spaced. There's no gap. There are no foreign objects in the butt space. I want to check the frame of the trailer. There are no bulges, no bends or cracks. I want to check the cross members. Cross members are secure and not cracked or broken. The floor, there are no holes in the floor. I want to check the splash guards. Splash guards are not damaged or torn or hanging. The DOT reflector tape is properly affixed in proper color red and white. I'd like to check my light. I'm under the truck now. I'd like to check my lights on the rear of the tractor. They're the proper color red. They're not broken or missing. And they're clean. I'd like to check the kingpin. The kingpin is not cracked or bent. And the locking jaw is locked behind the kingpin around the shank of the kingpin. We've now moved to the right side of the trailer. I'd like to examine the landing gear. I'm examining the structure, the platform. There's no damage to the structure. My landing gear is fully raised. There's no damage to the pads. And my landing gear handle is securely locked in place. We previously checked the operation of every light on this trailer. We're not going to show it, but I'm going to check the condition of every single light on this trailer. I'm now at the rear wheels of the trailer. I'd like to examine the torque arm. It's securely mounted, no missing nuts and bolts. I'm going to check the brake chamber. Brake chamber is securely mounted. There are no missing nuts and bolts. It's not leaking and no missing clamps. I want to check the brake hose. Brake hose is not cut or abrased are leaking. My couplings and fittings are secure on both ends. I want to check the spring mount. Spring mount is securely mounted. It's not broken. There are no missing nuts and bolts. Checking the leaf springs. The leaf springs are not cracked, shifted, or missing. And there are no missing bushings or bolts. I want to check the U-bolts. U-bolts are securely mounted. There are no missing nuts and bolts. And they're securely mounted. The brake drum. The brake drum is not cracked or damaged. There are no missing nuts and bolts. The brake lining is not damaged. It's not dangerously worn thin, and there are no contaminants on the lining or the brake drum, such as grease and oil. We're now going to check the condition of the rim, inside and out. There's no cracks or wells or no rust trails. We're going to check the lug nuts. The lug nuts are all present. They're not loose, and there are no distortion to the bolt holes. We're checking the hub oil seal. The hub oil seal is securely mounted and not leaking, and the oil is at the adequate level. We're going to check the valve stem and cap. Valve stem and cap are present. It's not bent or damaged. And we would check our air pressure with a tire gauge for proper air pressure. We're going to check the condition of the tires, the tread depth. Tread depth is a minimum, 230 seconds. It's evenly worn. There's no damage to the tread or the sidewalls. As a reminder, I've checked the condition of the tires on all the truck and trailer. The only difference is the tread depth minimum on the tractor is 4/32 seconds of an inch. The remainder of the tires minimum tread depth is 2/32 seconds of an inch. I'd like to check the condition of the door tie on the right side, and I would check the door tire on the left side as well. I'm going to check the condition of the doors on the rear of the trailer. We're going to open the door. It opens and closes properly. All my hinges are in good condition. There are no missing nuts and bolts. My door chains are in good condition. I'm checking the reflector tape on the rear of the doors. They're properly affixed, proper color red and white. I want to check the brake lights, tail lights, and turn signals on the rear of the trailer. They're in good condition. They're not broken, and they're proper color red. Marker lights, proper color red. They're not broken or missing, in good condition. I'm going to check the condition of the mud flaps on the rear of the trailer. They're not cut or torn or hanging. They're in good condition. Looking through the rear of the trailer, I'm inspecting the slack adjuster and push rod. They're securely mounted. There are no missing nuts and bolts. All clevis pins and cotter pins are in place. And if I would pull on the slack adjuster and push rod with the brakes released and the wheels chocked, they should not move more than 1 inch. Safety is the most important thing in our industry. The number one thing you can do is a proper pre-trip inspection. Thank you for joining us.